Okay, so if I'm not wrong, you're now a full-time YouTuber and coach. Is that right?
Um, I do online courses. So basically, I'm doing online courses and coaching. That's the main business. YouTube for me is, I suppose, really, it's a way of helping as many people as I can. And that's the way I see YouTube. I suppose, yeah, I am a YouTuber, but it's just another leg or another part of what I do.
Right. Good way of reaching people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And how do you compare working online, being self-employed, to working for a company?
Well, it's 1,000 times better. um, but definitely 1,000 times better. Um, it's tough. You've got to be pretty disciplined because it's very easy to not do anything important all day. But I setting up some routines does help. But yeah, I mean, I suppose really I'm one of those people who are not very good with a boss. So I kind of always knew that at some point I would have to go self-employed.
So being independent is why it's better for you.
It is, yeah. And I don't mind working weekends. My first job was in the hotel industry, and so weekends were weeks. There was no weekends when you work in the hotel industry. And so I think I did hotel management for 4 years. So for my first 4 years of my working life, there was no Monday to Friday, 9 till 5 in my life. It was sometimes, I mean, I remember one day I did a 24-hour shift. That was fun. Um, Back in the day, I don't think it would be legal today, but in the 90s it was legal. But I think I look at that as being a fantastic learning time for me because it put time into perspective. So for me, it was always about let's get the job done. There's always time to rest later or tomorrow morning, as the case may be in the hotel industry.
Right. So just teaching you to be a problem solver rather than it's 5 o'clock. I'll sort this out later.
Yeah, yeah. And you learn. I mean, I was a competitive athlete in my teenage years, so I remember like my final coach before I sort of discovered beer, girls, and pizza in my early 20s. But my final coach always said, listen to your body. So I was able to connect that to like my working life. If I feel tired, I'll give myself an easy day. And if I get a good night's sleep and I'm raring to go, full of energy, I'm just going to use that opportunity to do a lot of work. So although I do have a structure to the week, I'm very much more focused on how I feel. So I'm quite happy to reschedule something for another day.
Okay. Yeah. So I've seen you had these use calendar blocks, but those are all quite flexible depending on how much energy you have.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, for the most part, I'm pretty good. But Mondays I have to wake up early. Sunday nights are usually a late finish. So yeah, Mondays are not the most productive days for me. I've got used to that now. But Tuesdays, great days for getting a lot of work done.
Okay. And do you have
Mm.
times where you don't stick to your schedule, even if you've adjusted it, or you haven't adjusted it and you find yourself struggling to stick to it?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like everyone, I have days like that where yeah, it can be a challenging day, but I'm very comfortable pushing off the unimportant to another day. So it's never really a problem for me.
Not much of a perfectionist with it. You're just happy to get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have some like, I suppose you can call them principles. So, for example, client and customer questions will always get answered no matter what I feel. But, that I don't get a great deal of those, and pretty much everything else can wait. So I prioritize my clients and my customers, in the online courses, the students, if you like, they get prioritized. But if I'm really tired out, okay, everything else can be pushed off to another day.
And going back to talking about being self-employed online, Given all your experience in this, is this something you'd recommend to younger people or say your kids when they're deciding what they want to do as a career?
Absolutely, yeah. Because the problem when you work for a company is that what you're essentially doing is you're giving up your dreams for a paycheck. And I always think of that as like, I was actually talking with somebody yesterday, one of my clients who is also self-employed, and we are just saying that, you know, it's nice in many ways to have that guaranteed salary every month, but that's all you're going to get. And you might get a 5% increase, a 10% increase every year, but it's not going to be a significant big increase over over your work life. If you want to take advantage of your skills, and everybody has skills, whether they're aware of it or not, then I always usually recommend people start with a side project anyway. I mean, it's so easy now to start a side project, and then the world is your oyster. It depends on how much effort you're willing to put into it, how much development of yourself that you're willing to do. Um, I mean, I don't binge watch Netflix or anything like that. I will usually the last 30 minutes of my day, I will go and learn something online. And I also generally read books. I mean, I've always got a book on the go. So to me, it's about advancing my knowledge. I just love that learning process. And for the last year, I've been learning about the causes of obesity and diabetes. And then it's led me down another path of what's called functional medicine, which is using food to avoid a lot of the diseases. It's just like, wow. I mean, I have no plans to be a doctor, but I just love learning about that and seeing the different arguments that you get online between like people who are like 100% vegan and people who are 100% keto, they're eating just meat. And I'm thinking, well, obviously there's a middle road here somewhere. But it's just fascinating learning about that.
You go online and you really follow your interests down whatever road it takes.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I'm in the mood for learning, I mean, things will pique my interest, and I think, oh yeah, let's have a look at that, and think, yeah, or wow, this is interesting, and then I will get into it a lot more.
So what has the path looked like for you from day one of starting your side project to where you are now?
Well, it's for me, this is one of the principles of like, if you're going to start your own business, I say you need PACT. PACT stands for patience, action. It's a long time since that. Consistency and time. Now, I started with writing a blog post every week in 2015. It was January 2015. I decided I've learned a lot over the 20, 30 years that I've been studying productivity and time management. It's time now to just tell people what I've learned. And I started the blog 2015. End of 2015, I thought, where next? I started the YouTube channel. And then at the end of 2016, I think it was 2017, midway through 2017, I started a podcast. And also in 2017, that's when I started putting together my online courses. So it wasn't like I had this perfect plan where I was going to be writing a blog post, doing a podcast, and doing 2 YouTube videos a week. That was never like the plan. It just said, I'm going to write a blog. And that's where it started. Now, in 2015, if you wrote a blog, you were never going to get paid because there was no channel, no platform to get paid. Today, there's things like Medium and Substack where you can get paid for writing. It's like, whoa. Um, so the opportunities for people, whether you want to do video, because YouTube pays, once you get past, I think it's 1,000 subscribers, YouTube will start paying you a percentage of adverts that are on your videos. Medium pays, I'm on Medium. You can bring in a reasonably good income each month just from writing. So that's where it kind of, wherever you have an interest, a passion, and it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, if you go on YouTube and type in F1, there are thousands of YouTube channels just dedicated to F1. Formula One racing. It's just unbelievable how many channels, and they're so popular. And it's just amazing what you might think, oh, nobody's going to be interested in this subject. You'd be surprised. There are millions of people out there wanting to learn new things, and your subject could be just something that they want to learn.
Yeah, I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, I think. It seems like a lot of content is slowly becoming much more niche. Like back in the day, you could start a fitness blog, whereas
Mm.
now that's far too broad a scope to have a popular blog, so it would have to be dedicated to one specific aspect, like yoga, or even a specific type of yoga.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say because I've just gone over I was 52 this year, so I would be doing like 50 plus fitness because that would be the space that I'm in. And when I was a teenager, I was running every day, and that was my thing. But as you get older, you need to start building in, like weightlifting. You've got to start keep maintaining your muscle basically, because as you get older, muscle disappears. So there's a different type of fitness requirements for somebody over 50. So if I was to start a channel on that, I would be going at something that I can actually demonstrate myself.
That's generally your advice for any kind of content creation. Do something that, well, I guess you have experience in. You're kind of helping
Yeah,
people who are on the same journey as you are.
yeah, yeah. Think of it as you're helping people who want to start the same journey or go on the same journey.
As a young person, it can be hard to find that interest, though, seeing as you have much less experience than someone else.
Well, it's interesting because I have a few people I follow on Facebook, and you know, one of them, she's probably about 28, and she's a life coach. Now, initially, you think, how can somebody at the age of 28 be a life coach? They haven't experienced life. But actually, she went through a really, really difficult time in her family, and like a lot of negative stuff happening to her. And she has learned from that, and she's turned it into a positive. And I think she's being really smart because she sort of says your past doesn't equal your future, which is very true. And you can change just like that. And a lot of it is just attitude. So it's either you want to play the victim, or you're just going to get on and put the past behind you, learn from it, and move on. And that's her niche, and she's doing fantastically well. So you might there's that imposter syndrome, but we've all lived life differently. We've all had different experiences. We've gone through good times and bad times, and if you can learn from both those and then apply that in a way to help other people, you can do it.
On a related note, in one of your videos, you said that the importance of having goals is not what we achieve, but who we become.
Hmm.
Could you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I've one of the interesting things about goal setting is the very word goal generally puts people into negativity because apparently the statistics are only 8% of people will ever achieve their goals. Well, with those kind of stats, you're kind of already on the back foot before you start. But what I've learned is that you need to start with a vision. The vision of how you want to be living your life in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how old you are. I always think like, imagine yourself retired. What would you like to be doing? And you can do that at any age. But most people's vision of that is, oh, I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm going to be playing with my grandkids and all this lot. And yet they're stuffing their face with junk food, gaining weight and becoming diabetic. And you think, well, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be having to stay at home because you've got hospital appointments to attend. Now, is that the way you want to live your final years? Probably not. So once you know that let's say you want to have an active retirement, well, that means you need to be setting goals that are going to keep you in good health. It doesn't you don't have to be like an Olympic athlete, but you know, thinking about how you're going to eat. Like this year, my goal is to quit sugar, for example, or this year I'm going to quit junk food. What you decide what you're going to do, because it's all part of that ultimate vision. So the vision is pulling you, rather than you feel like you're pushing yourself through life. You want something to pull you because pulling is much easier. If you're being pulled, that's so much easier. So my wife and I, we have these crazy goals, if you like, or crazy vision for what we want to do in the future. And it's quite funny. There's a small airport about 25 miles north of here. And every time we drive past, we're saying it's where we're going to park the private jet. Now, we kind of half jokingly say that, but there's a side of that we're saying, yeah, we're going to build this big international business, this big global business. And we will need a private jet because we'll be doing talks. I mean, the way that the world has changed in the last 2 years, it's probably unlikely I'll be flying around the world doing talks to thousands of people in a stadium because we're moving, all that kind of stuff is moving online. But it's still a vision of how I want to be, how I want my business to grow. So it's not so much about the goals, it's what you have to do in order to become the person that you want to become. So for me, health and fitness is really important because I don't ever want to retire. So I took inspiration from Prince Philip when he passed away last year. There was lots of articles. You know, Prince Philip retired when he was 97. I'm going, that's my life. That's what I want. And that got me interested. So how did he still perform every day until the age of 12? He died at 99. And when he retired, he actually retired to a farm. So he was still farming even at 99. But I was thinking, how did he do that? And then I realized, and when I discovered it was, he did this exercise program called 5BX, which is 5 basic exercises that he did every single day from the time he was in the Navy. I was thinking, wow, that's like 70 years. The guy did these exercises every single day. And I thought, well, there you go. That's kind of how he maintained the strength to be able to keep going. And I was thinking, that's what I want. I want the strength to keep going and going and going and going. I never want to retire. So now I know I have to exercise every day.
It's the power of consistency right there.
It is, yes. And it's something that I learned, which is, and this comes from a guy called Jim Rohn, who always said, success leaves clues. So find somebody who's doing what you want to do and research how they've done it because they've given you the blueprint. You don't need to go blind. You can look at it and think, all right, this guy did this and this guy did this, and I can marry those two together and I can move my way towards the same direction.
Is that how you approached making content, writing your blog or writing on Medium or making videos?
Yeah, I think once I started writing the blog, I said, what next? And then I thought, well, who's killing this field? Who's in the self-development field that's really doing well? And Tony Robbins, a guy called Robin Sharma, Brian Tracy, these guys have been around for a while, actually. So I started tracking them. I followed them on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and I'm looking at websites and saying, well, what are they doing? How did they build their business? Now, the benefit for me is when they started, there was no, well, certainly Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy, when they started, no internet. So they had to do it through cassette tapes and CD programs that they sold in service stations on the motorway service stations. It's fantastic. So you could put the tape in the car and listen to these self-help tapes. That's how they did it. But when I started, we had YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all these things and LinkedIn. So I thought, okay, I can shortcut this. I can get my content out there without having to find distribution deals with, publishers. I can do it myself. So looking at what these people who are succeeding in the business that you want to be in and figuring out how you can modify that blueprint so you can get there faster. So as they say, success leaves clues.
What are the long-term plans with your business then?
I just want to keep growing the business. I mean, as I say, I never want to retire. And ultimately, I want to help millions and millions of people. So my job is going out there and putting out content the best thing about doing the coaching program that I do is I get to see what other people, where other people are struggling, and that can then come, that can filter down into the content that I produce. And so I can help other people because often we don't know why something is a struggle. And so I can try and unpack what the problem is, kind of deconstruct how people got into that situation, and then come up with a solution. And I love that. That's part of the best thing about my job is seeing where people are struggling and then figuring out how to fix that. So I see myself as a problem solver.
Right. And you find that gives you a lot of fulfillment from your job.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the business for me is, I mean, I've got an easy target. I just say 18% growth every year. So I worked out where I want the business to be at the end of the decade and where I was in 2020. And then I just kind of worked out the percentages and thinking, oh, 18% growth year on year, and I'll get to my target.
So how do you scale up? Are you currently doing a lot of one-to-one coaching?
I do, but you've got to be careful with that one-to-one coaching because you're selling time, and time doesn't scale.
I was going to ask about this growth if you're currently uh, doing a lot of one-to-one coaching, or if that's
Yeah.
not the case anymore.
Well, no, I mean, I still do 20, I do 21 calls a week. I have 21 slots a week. But the way I look at it is 80% of my business comes from the online courses and 20% of my business comes from the coaching. And I like that ratio. So if the ratio was flipped and 80% was coming from coaching and 20% from courses, that would be a problem because that's not really scalable. So when every quarter I just look at the income and then work out, the percentages, the ratio, and yeah, it's roughly. I think last quarter it was 79-81. I mean, I'm happy. Sorry, 79-21. I was happy with that.
One more question about starting out with the content. When you started out, did you have a marketing strategy that you found from other people who were in a similar boat, or were you more just focused on making valuable content and putting it out on platforms?
Oof. When I first started, I didn't have any any marketing plan at all. In fact, actually, when I first started, the only thing was I'm going to write a blog. That's it. That's all it was. I was going to write a blog. Um, it just over time, as the blog grew and then the YouTube channel, I started thinking, wait a minute, I can do more with this. And so, but I think the best thing I ever did was actually just start slow with the blog and then the YouTube channel. So it's 2 years of essentially creating content before I monetized anything. So it was 2 years before I put together my first course. And it was probably 4 years before I actually did 3 years before I did my first coaching calls, but 4 years before I turned that into like a part of the business. And so by the time I did that, I had 104 blog posts because I'd been writing every week, a blog post a week. Um, and I was probably at about over 100 videos on YouTube. So now, when you think about it, I have a huge portfolio of content that I could just put out every day on social media. So it wasn't like, January 2015, I went, this is going to be the plan, year one, year two, year three, and then I'm going to do that. It wasn't like that. And I don't know any business that actually ever grew like that because that's not the way it works.
You can't plan these things too much. It doesn't work out the way you think it will.
No, it never does. There's I think there's the Mike Tyson famous quote, which is like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Um, you know, and when you have a business idea and you, I think this is one of the bigger problems, which is why in the Pact series, action is the second point, because a lot of people spend way too much time planning and way too much thinking about what they're going to do, and they're using that as an excuse not to take action. And you'll never have a business, no matter how much planning or organizing or thinking. That's not a business. That's just an idea. A business is when you actually take those ideas and take action and do something, publish something. And a lot of people, they never do that. And it's like, you just have an idea. And it's funny, my wife on Wednesday said to me that something, yeah, these little coffee shops in mountains, in the mountain area here in Korea, um, they're designed for people to go and take pictures, and you can have a coffee at the same time. So the scenery and everything. So she said, I had that idea 15 years ago. And I just said, why didn't you act on it? Because somebody else has acted on it and he's now making a lot of money from it. Um, that's the thing. If you ideas are just that until you take action and do something. And that involves leaving your comfort zone, which is scary.
Yeah, I guess that's why people tend to overplan often. They just don't want to get started. It can be tough to find the momentum, whether it's a business or whether it's anything else that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Just getting started is often the hardest part.
I have a few clients where we're working on this. And one of the things is, let's start easy. Let's just pick one evening a week where you're going to do something on your business that's not planning or thinking. So it could be writing some text for a website, writing that, designing the homepage. And you can design the homepage in PowerPoint or Keynote. I mean, it's not difficult. Once you've designed it, the next step is publish it. But you've already got a nice website. You've done the text. The hardest work's done. It's just get a website, go to squarespace.com or somewhere like that and just buy a domain and just go.
So do you often find your clients are just getting in their own way?
Yeah, I've been doing it long enough now. I can spot procrastination a mile away. And I can see and I also recognize the excuses that people are making because it's the same excuse every time about why they haven't done something. And
What is it?
it's like, oh, I'm not ready yet is a classic one. Well, when will you be ready? you know, the thing about if you're going to start an online business, your first 20 to 50 content pieces are going to be crap. They're going to be rubbish. I've never deleted my first YouTube video because it is horrible. And it's my inspiration because I can look back 7 years now and look at that first video and go, oh my God, why did I publish that? But then I stop and think, that's where it all started. If I hadn't have posted that first horrible video, then I wouldn't be where I am today. It has to start somewhere, and you just have to get comfortable with where you start will be crap. It's just, that's the way it is. But that's good because you learn and you grow and you get better, and it's fantastic. So I think it took me 20 videos to realize that microphone is very important. Sounds horrible without a microphone on a YouTube video, but it took me 20 videos to figure that one out, and then I invested in a microphone, and that was the next step. So, and then I discovered lighting. And it took me 30 videos to figure out that lighting is very important too. But to me, it was like, this is just one of the best learning experiences ever. Because I have a little studio down there now, but my first light, it cost me what, £35, about 40, $50. It's fantastic. I go, whoa, I have this light, but that's all part of the journey. That's the fun part. You'll never be perfect when you start.
Any other common mistakes you see amongst your clients?
Well, most people's mistake is usually they're trying to do way too much. It's very much like my mother used to say, my eyes are bigger than my stomach. Um, we I think that's just a human condition. We have this bad habit of thinking we can do more in a day than we really can. But I think one of the most powerful quotes I ever heard was most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And if you plan for the decade, you can achieve incredible results. But if you plan for the year, you're probably just going to make it way too big.
So real productivity really starts with this long-term idea of what's happening in 10 or 20 years time, rather than what am I going to do today?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you really want to get better with time management and productivity, you really have to understand what's important to you first. Now, the mistake most people make is they start with what's important with my boss and my customers and my clients. Well, yeah, but that's dealing with the here and now. What you really want to do is start with you. What's important to you? And there's usually eight. There's eight things that we all share. You know, family and relationships, finances, career, personal development, health and fitness, lifestyle, life experiences. There's these eight areas that in common with everybody, but the priority changes depending on where you are in life. So when you're in school, self-development, education, that's going to be a priority. And when you get older, you'll realize that family and relationships are very important. Finances start climbing up the ladder. When you're at school, bank of mum and dad is taking care of the finances, so it's probably low down on your list. But as moving up and you get married and you get a mortgage and think your finances is going to start moving up the ladder. Lifestyle and life experiences is always there or thereabouts. And again, as you get older, health and fitness starts raising its head and that will start climbing. So it changes as we go through life, but they're still the same. And once you know what they mean to you, and you can associate tasks that need to be performed regularly, whether monthly, weekly, or daily, that's where it starts. And then everything else comes on top. So you always know that each day, each week, you're taking care of the important things in your life rather than in somebody else's life. Because the easy way out is to wait for somebody to tell you what to do, which is what 99% of the population does, because they wait for their boss to tell them to do something or their partner to say, come on, let's go shopping. Let's go to this place for our holiday. They're always waiting for somebody else to tell them what to do, when really you want to take control of your life and say, this is what I want to do. Are you going to join me on my journey? And that's when you start getting inspired. And that's that pull, because you know what you want to achieve.
So do you think your passion for productivity, your passion for time management started when you started thinking about it in a way, this is helping me do the things that will really lead to a more meaningful life?
I think so. I mean, I've just always liked the idea of being organized and good with my time. It's weird. I don't know where I've often thought about it because it started when I was in middle school. I was reading books on time management at school and I was designing revision timetables by pen and paper. I was terrible at the actual revision, but I was very good at designing a plan to do it. Um, and I think it all started from there, and I absolutely loved it. And the digital world has been fantastic. Smartphones and everything else that we have now has turned everything digital. So it's a wonderful journey, and it's changing all the time.
So what helped you go from having a plan but not executing on it in middle school to having a plan and actually following through with it like you are now?
Well, when I first started working, like most young people, I needed a direction, somebody to give me the direction. At school, I had to do the revision, and I did do the revision, but I was an average student. But when you start working for a company, as I did, um, you have a manager who says this is how you do it, and I took that and then modified it so it was more efficient. And I think that's where it just started. So that, for example, when I started working in a bar in a hotel, what often happened was I remember doing a night shift one day. I was doing a day shift, but I remember doing a night shift one time, and there was no gym tonic water bottles in the refrigerator. And I went, well, why did that happen? And I realized it happened because they were doing we called it bottling up on a, what do you call it, late at night, but it wouldn't come up until 7, 8 o'clock. So I just sort of like went down and got the bin with all the bottles and brought it up in the morning because it was always quiet in the morning and just restocked all the refrigerators because I was either going to be standing around waiting for a customer or I could be doing something. So, and we also helped those people who were working late at night because they weren't running out of stuff. And it's that sort of thing is looking at how can I do it better? How can I improve this system? Has always fascinated me. And I still do it today. Always looking at how can I improve this system?
And then you started helping other people improve their systems, and then that's when the passion really took off into something more full time.
Yeah, and also the fact I mean coming to Korea, which I did 20 years ago, to teach English. I was no plans long term career as a teacher, but I fell in love with teaching, and it's like I remember, Steve Jobs said in that famous Stanford speech, you don't connect the dots going forward, you connect the dots going backwards. And now looking back, I realized the best decision I ever made was deciding to come and teach English into Korea because I got 15 years of teaching adult experience that I would never have had I not made that decision. So, you connect the dots eventually, you realize, that's where that became useful.
And often I think we start something and it's new and exciting, and then there's a phase where the novelty wears off, but you haven't started seeing any results yet, so the motivation from making progress hasn't yet kicked in. Is this something you've experienced in your life?
Yes, but you kind of got to push. I mean, that's again about developing the process. So I mentioned that I write a blog post every week. Uh, I write that. I used to write that every Monday morning. Now I do calls on Monday morning, so I write it every Tuesday morning, and that's just something that I just do. It just feels well. If I ever have a week off, which is very rare, but if I ever have a week off, it feels really weird if I'm not writing something on a Tuesday morning. Same with Friday morning. I record all my YouTube videos on a Friday morning, and the same thing. If I don't do record a video on Friday morning, it's something feels weird. It's just what I do, and it's all about putting in place the process. It's just what you do. When you start a side project or a new business, there are certain things that you have to do every week, every month, every quarter. Some things you have to do every day. But when it comes to creating content, you've got to be consistent with it. I've seen so called internet marketers who create these wonderful websites and they'll put 5 blog posts up there and think that's enough. Well, the problem is that people are not stupid. They can see that this is just, bog standard 5 blog posts to say that I've got a blog. But that doesn't build a community. That doesn't help people. But writing every week does. It builds a community. And one of the amazing things that I've seen is just amazing people that I've met through building this community through blog post writing and my YouTube videos. And it's just amazing what happens when you are consistent. But it's just something that I do every Tuesday morning. I will sit down, I write for about 90 minutes, and I really now enjoy it. But it has been a slog at times. But you just get on and do it. But it's not a slog all the time, because if it is a slog all the time, you're not doing the right thing. You should change. You need to really, it's really important to enjoy the process.
What's the ratio of enjoying it to having it be a slog that you think is an acceptable ratio?
I would say 75% of the time you want to be enjoying it, and about 25% it will feel like a slog. And that actually, when it does feel like a slog, it's usually because you're running out of ideas, which is fine because that's going to happen to everyone. Um, if I've been writing a blog post now for every week for 7 years, that's 350 plus blog posts that I've written. So of course, I'm going to have weeks where I'm struggling to come up with ideas, but you just got to push through. Those are the weeks that I just have to push through. And there's always something. And I'll go onto YouTube and I'll watch a few other productivity videos, and then something they say will just spark and go, right, that's it. That's what I'm going to write about this week.
About how much time does it take you to write a blog post?
It takes about, well, these days it'll probably take me about an hour because I've got a system in place where I know how to start right. But then there's about 30 to 45 minutes of editing before it gets posted. So in total, I'd say 90 minutes to do a blog post. And podcast is probably 3 hours. So it's like 2 hours of writing the script, an hour of recording and editing, and then YouTube videos, depending on what I'm doing. So if it's a standard, what I call hamburger video, which is introduction, tutorial, and then ending, that probably only takes an hour. If it's more of a talking to the camera and giving advice, that might only take about 20 minutes to record the voice, but it's going to take 4 hours to edit because you've got to put bits into the video, and that will take a long time. So, and that's something else you pick up as you go along. You learn very quickly how long something takes.
Have you seen the time it takes you to produce a piece of content decrease over time?
Oh yeah, it does, because you just get better at it. So yeah, it gets quicker, and that it will always get quicker because your processes are constantly improving.
So do you find that with your day-to-day work or general habits, there's much willpower involved? Does it still become a slog sometimes, or is it mostly quite easy?
It feels easier now. In fact, actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I think it's beginning to feel too easy, which is a sign that I need to up the ante a bit and just look for where I can improve something. So one of the areas I was looking at is, okay, how can I make my YouTube videos more cinematic? So that was the question I posed myself this morning, was how can I make them more cinematic and more storytelling rather than tutorial? And it's just started today. So I mean, maybe in 3 or 4 months' time, those results will start coming through. But it's the question that I like to ask is how can I make that better? And it's also like how can I make my courses better? So when you start to feel a bit too comfortable, it's time to change something to make something better because it's always about continuous and never-ending improvement.
I like that. And do you find your style of coaching has changed over the years?
It probably has, but I've never really noticed it because it changes slowly over time. So it must have changed a lot. Um, I've been doing it about 4 years, I think now. But I think the way that it changes is that I gain more experience. So I'm now hearing the same excuses, if you like, or the same problems. A lot of it is excuses, but I also hear the same problems. And so I've developed now strategies that can help people to pin down a solution to that problem. So, yeah, but I'm not inside, I don't feel like it's changed much, but it must have done.
And can you give me a quick rundown of the programs that you use to manage your tasks and your time at the moment?
Well, Todoist is my task manager of choice. I've been using that for about 8 years about 8 years now. It's my go-to task manager. It runs my life, I tend to say. Evernote is my second brain, if you like. It that just manages all my ideas, notes, projects. Everything is in Evernote related to that. And then the rest of the time, I'm just using that. Apple Mail is my mail mail service of choice. Calendar is just because I use all my systems in Apple systems, so I use Apple Calendar for my calendar. Although I should point out that Google Calendar is the back end. So Google Calendar is where my calendar is, but it's coming into Apple Calendar. Apple Calendar is basically a shell. You just tell it where to look. So you can look at Apple's calendar system or Google's or Outlook, Microsoft's. You just tell it where to look, and then it will pull in your events. Um, so Apple Calendar. So I try to keep things at a minimum. So my task manager to do is my notes app is Evernote, and my calendar is basically Apple Calendar.
And someone getting started with productivity, should they first look at to set up these systems, or should they start with a different way, more self-analysis of where they're going wrong?
If somebody's struggling with task management, I think the most important thing to do is, if you're not using a task manager, use one. So you can use Apple Reminders or Google Tasks or Microsoft To Do. You don't have to buy anything. They're freely available on whatever platform you use. But you really want to get that your the tasks that you have to do, you need to get them written down somewhere. So even if you don't want to use anything digital, just get a piece of paper and just write it all down, because that process of writing down will tell you what needs to be done. You'll see the important stuff. It'll jump out at you. But if you leave it in your head doesn't know what's important and what's not important. So it reminds you of the most stupidest things at the most stupidest times, like, buy milk when you're having a beer in the pub. That's not the time to tell me to buy milk. Or you call back this client, but it tells you it's at like 11 p.m. at night. The brain is just terrible at that sort of thing. It doesn't have a time context. But if you can just externalize everything that you feel in your mind that you have to do, just write it all down. You'll see okay, I've got these 5 calls. So let's group them together, and I'll do those at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I've got to reply to all these emails. Well, let's give myself an hour to clear my email. You can, once you see it either digitally or on paper, now you can make much, much better decisions, and your brain lets go, which is fantastic, because once your brain lets go, you can breathe.
Going on to books, have there been any books on productivity or any other topic that you found have had a big impact on you?
Well, I tell you, the one book that I would recommend everybody to read, if you even considering starting your own business in any way, then Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's an old book. It's been around since, I think, 1930, but it's still valid today. It's a brilliant book, incredibly inspiring. And one of the interesting things, I don't know if you, Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4 Hour Working Week, he wrote a book called The Tribe of Titans, I think it is, where he interviewed a load he interviewed a load of really successful people. And one of the questions he asked is, what 3 books would you recommend? 80% of those successful people, 80% said Think and Grow Rich. You've got to read that book. If you ever want to start your own thing, whatever it is, whether it's a social media, influencing, your own business, Think and Grow Rich is book number 1. You've got to read it and reread it every year. It is a fabulous book. The second one, I would say, because we're talking about how do you develop the habit of following the process, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's just a phenomenal book, and it will teach you the skills you need in order to turn that habit, that hobby idea or whatever, into an actionable habit that you do day in, day out, week in, week out. That's just one of the best books I've read in a very, very long time. Those two books I would recommend every time. And as I say, it's and if you just to give one more is a Tony Robbins book, which is called "Awaken the Giant Within." Again, it's a little bit old. It was written in the 1990s, I think. It's called "Awaken the Giant Within." But what it will do is it will teach you, that book will teach you how to overcome those limiting beliefs that are stopping you from taking action. It's just a really good book at making you realize that you have incredible potential, and it's just your brain is giving you that negative feedback loop that's stopping you. And that book will uncover a lot of those issues so that you will actually start taking action. But number one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Second would be Atomic Habits by James Clear, and Awaken the Giant Within, a Tony Robbins book. All three books they are life transformative.
It seems like a nice balance. One book on business, one book on consistency, and one book on self-belief. Seems to be three of the pillars that you need for that. Okay. And just one more question then. Do you have any more general advice for young people, such as your kids, if they were on the verge of leaving home and deciding for themselves? So, what advice would you give them or any other young people for how, if they're wondering how they should be spending their time going forward?
Best thing is in your 20s, do incredibly stupid, crazy things because it won't matter. I mean, in your 20s, if you're taking life too seriously, you're making a huge mistake because you regret that for the rest of your life. In your 20s, you've got to make the most stupidest, craziest, unbelievably bad mistakes because that's the time to do it. But one of the best things I learned in my 20s was do all sorts of crazy stuff. And also, like, try not to settle into a career. Well, it's a little bit different. If you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, then or an architect, there's a long period of studying to do. So in your 20s, you're going to be serious. But for most people, if they want, who just want to have a career in business, go and do all sorts of crazy jobs. I mean, my job, I've sold feminine hygiene products. I remember selling that. That was an interesting job. I've done bar work. I worked in hotels. I did night management. I sold cars. I did all sorts in my 20s. And I really, really am so glad I did because in each of those jobs, I learned something that I've been able to use in my later life. And your 20s is the time to do it because you don't have as many responsibilities in your 20s. But usually by the time you get into your 30s, you're settling down, you've got a partner, you may have kids, you've probably got a mortgage. You know, that's not the time to be doing crazy stuff. So I tend to look at my 20s was a decade of exploration. My 30s was a kind of figuring out. I mean, I was learning actually. I was teaching at that time, but I was kind of honing my skills. And then by the time I think I started my business, around about I was 38. So I started my English language business when I was 38. Um, so 20s, just do the crazy stuff now because if you don't, you'll regret it.
Okay. Well, I'll take that to heart.
But you get so much more experience from that. That's the best thing about it.
Well, I'm 25, so I'll have to find something crazy to go out and do today then.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you, Carl. Thank you for all your answers.
You're welcome.